I'm a bass player, improviser, composer and teacher. I work mainly in the field of contemporary improvised music with strong influences from jazz and classical music. At the core of my work are always the double bass and improvisation. This artistic work is an ongoing process. It has been developing for many years and it continues to evolve. I work with many different people on different projects. The work itself is very practical. It happens through playing, rehearsing and practicing, composing, discussing, teaching and reflecting. At certain moments it takes concrete forms, a concert, an album or a lesson. Every project is based on a clear formal and structural conception. We try to realize it with as much precision and concentration as possible. But because improvisation is at the core of the process, the outcome can never be completely determined in advance. Following this path often leads me to new perspectives and sometimes to entirely new positions. These then become the starting point for the next work. First of all, it's a lot of fun. I have a natural impulse to make music, something that keeps me coming back to it again and again. Sometimes it feels almost like an addiction, the search for that moment when you play music and suddenly it becomes bigger than life. I'm also very interested in the process itself. It allows me to go deeper into music and through music to understand myself, life and society a little better. In a way, I'm trying to reach something impossible through art. I try to get closer to things as they really are, beyond my own perspective and interpretation. Of course, this is impossible. In the worst case, I fail completely. In the best case, only partially. But the attempt itself is meaningful to me. Making music trains my ability to listen, to distinguish and to make decisions. It helps me develop an inner compass for navigating the world. In this sense, making music keeps me alert to the truth. I find it fascinating that practices as old as playing the double bass and improvising are still so powerful in a contemporary context. For me, they are not only ways of making music, they can also open up ways of thinking about social and political questions. I see my music as an invitation to perceive and engage with the world around us. At its best, it opens up new perspectives on the present, inspires a sense of wonder, raises questions, and creates an open space for listening, feeling, and thinking together. My main tool is the double bass. Over the years, I have developed a personal and new musical and sonic language through which I interact with other musicians. This language grows out of different musical traditions that I have studied, practiced and performed for many years, but it also goes beyond them. One of these traditions is the role of the bass as a grounding element in music, a function that goes back hundreds of years and is closely connected to rhythm and how music feels. Another is the Western major-minor tonal system, which forms an important basis for the harmonic language of both jazz and classical music. I also have many reference points, as I call them, records, musicians, compositions, artists or concepts that I have studied over the years. I can return to them when I get lost on my own path to find some ground again. This could be a novel by Thomas Bernhard or a bass line by Paul Chambers. But underneath all of this there is something even more fundamental: my everyday life and the world around me. Music is nourished by the world and not by itself. It can be something as simple as watching my old dog walk down the street, or the way a matter is handled at a school. I don't translate these experiences directly into music, but they shape who I am, how I perceive the world, and inevitably how I make music. I bring all of these traditions, reference points, experiences, and my improvisational skill to every project I work on. Whether it's a composition, playing a jazz standard, an educational task, or a long-term band project. I started making music myself at the age of 7 when I began playing the cello and studying classical music. But my first important musical experience came some years later when I joined a cello ensemble. In this ensemble I experienced for the first time how much larger music could become through interaction. Every voice dependent on the others. Listening was not an additional skill, it was the basis of playing. It took me a very long time to become a good listener, and I'm still working on it today. But this kind of interaction rooted in chamber music is still one of the core principles of my music. After about 7 years of playing the cello, I began to feel limited by the precisely notated structures of classical music and by the expectation to reproduce them faithfully. I wanted to understand what could happen when the structure was no longer determined in advance. I was in search for something more alive. Jazz opened the first perspective on this idea. So I switched to the double bass and began working with improvisation. Instead of only reproducing what was already written, I had to decide for myself how to place sounds in time. At the same time, my interest in different forms of contemporary music led me toward new and open forms, structures, and sonic possibilities. Since then, much of my work has been concerned with the relationship between structure and freedom, individual action and collective interaction, intention and discovery. Improvisation is the core principle of all my musical actions. From early on, it came very naturally to me. But what do I actually mean when I say improvisation? Two people have helped me understand this way of working: Christopher Dell and my luthier Martin Hillmann. Playing with Christopher for the past 4 years in the band Blumer, Dell, Geisser, Morgenthaler, and our ongoing discussions about music, improvisation and society taught me to understand improvisation not just as a musical technique, but as a way of thinking and acting. Christopher's ability to apply these ideas to very different fields opened up new perspectives for me. I also learned a lot from watching Martin build the double bass I now play every day. It took him over 2 years to complete the instrument. What I observed was not the blind execution of a plan. Martin has a clear concept, a great deal of knowledge about and love for his craft, a deep understanding of physics and music, and many years of experience. But to build an instrument or anything else, he worked step by step, responding to the result of each previous step and to what the material allowed him to do next. This made me understand something important about improvisation. I don't see improvisation as an emergency response to unforeseen things, as simply reacting spontaneously to whatever happens, or as a search for something to happen in a moment of emptiness. For me, improvisation is a real-time technology for creating in an open space where not everything can be planned in advance. The structure and form emerge directly through the process of improvising. Planning and execution happen at the same time. Every step builds on the one that came before, retrospectively changes its meaning, and creates the condition for the next step. For this to work, you need to listen deeply and be fully present in the moment. What you can do in that moment also depends on what you bring with you and how sharp your senses are. With this rather simple technique, very complex structures and forms can emerge. For me, this is a way of coming closer to the truth. The double bass is an ideal instrument for me because I'm fascinated by things that appear simple but are essentially very complex. A bass line, for example, can appear very simple, and every bass player has basically the same set of tools to build one. But the choice of notes, the timing, the sound and the feeling can vary enormously from one bass player to another. And when it's done well, a simple bass line can carry a whole world within it. At the same time, the double bass has an extremely broad sonic range. It constantly challenges me to find new solutions for every musical situation I play in. The low frequencies are very physical. You don't only hear them, you can feel them in your body. And they immediately interact with the room you play in. This connects very closely to the way I work, being fully present in the situation I'm in and responding to what is actually there. After all these years, the double bass still challenges and surprises me. There is always something more to discover.